What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We have another edition of Prototypical Patriots to throw at you. We're actually going to hit two positions today. We're going both corner and tight end. We're cleaning up some things on the offensive side of the ball. We're starting to transition to the defensive side of the ball. Really interesting to go through this exercise, as it is every year. But where things were so different going through our prototypes on the offensive side of the ball because of the change in the front office with Elliott Wolf heading up things and assuming that he has certain prototypes that he's looking for on that side of the ball on the defensive side of things. Whereas I'm sure he has his own opinions on what you need to be successful at the NFL level on the defensive side of the ball. It's actually worked out okay for the Patriots the last few years under Bill Belichick in terms of what they've been after and how those types of players fit into their scheme. The defense hasn't been a problem. So will they be changing all that much in terms of what they're looking for from the college ranks to be able to insert into their system defensively under Gerard Mayo, under DeMarcus Covington, Dante Hightower? All these guys are Mike Pellegrino, Bill Belichick guys. Brian Belichick, of course, at the safety position. So I don't think we're going to see all that much change on the defensive side. So we're going to rely on our old thresholds, our old metrics that we trusted with our prototypical Patriot series in the past on the defensive side of things, whereas we changed them quite a bit on the offensive side. But we'll hit you with two different positions today. We also have a fantastic interview with Charles Davis, NFL media, gives us his thoughts on Jayden Daniels versus Drake Maye. He's going to talk about all the things that impressed him after watching Drake Maye and all of the things that he still needs to clean up at the next level. But you're going to hear some optimism from Charles Davis on the Drake Maye front and on the Jayden Daniels front as well. Charles Davis, Tennessee Volunteer through and through, SEC guy. So when he sees Jayden Daniels have the success that he had in 2023 in that all-powerful conference for LSU, it's going to impress him. So he likes both those players. And if the Patriots are comfortable with both, which I think ultimately they will be, to take whoever falls to them at number 3 overall, that feels like the right play. It sounds like Charles Davis feels like it's the right play as well. He also has a suggestion for this new Patriots regime if they opt not to take a quarterback. And it's almost more of a PR suggestion than anything else. And I think you're really going to want to hear that too, because I find it interesting as somebody who covers this team. You will find it as interesting as somebody who is a fan in all likelihood of this team. So stick around for that conversation with Charles Davis. But let's first roll right into our prototypes at the tight end position. And again, as has been the case on the offensive side of the ball, as we've worked our way through this series, we're going back through the branches of the Ron Wolf executive tree. It includes Ron Wolf, Elliott Wolf's father, of course, but also Ted Thompson, John Dorsey, John Schneider, Reggie McKenzie, Scott McCloughan, Brian Gutekunst, all of these guys who became general managers who were running their own personnel departments after having worked for Ron Wolf. We assume by looking at the picks that those men have made over the course of time, we can come away with a relatively complete picture of what Elliott Wolf might like, again, on the offensive side of things. And so at tight end, what have those general managers drafted in the first 3 rounds? We found 11 players at tight end. So for all those general managers, only 11 taken in rounds 1, 2, or 3. So they haven't necessarily been early round investments, although there have been a few. But on average, these players checked in at 6'4", 252 pounds. That's pretty good size, especially given what you see coming into the league at that position in the here and now. That's practically massive compared to what's coming into the league now at that position. When you look at somebody like Brock Bowers, who looks like he's going to be a first-round pick, who checks in somewhere in the 230-pound range. And we're talking about guys who on average are 6'4", 252, 4.72 in the 40. That's the average 40 time for these 11 players, and short shuttle times of 4.36, average jumps of 34 inches in the vertical and 9'11", almost 10 feet in the broad. I found this to be pretty interesting when putting together those average scores. And I've referenced Kent Lee Platt before at MathBomb on Twitter, his site ras.football, were able to come up with relative athletic scores for all of these draftable players for going back decades. I can plug in those average numbers that I just rattled off for you and find a relative athletic score. So what is the average relative athletic score for a Ron Wolf executive tree tight end. It's 8.36. Anything over 8 is considered very good, verging on elite. And here's what was interesting about that. One of the closest comps, because Platt's site will give you comps based on whatever RAS, relative athletic score, you happen to be looking at. And for the average Ron Wolf executive tree tight end, one of the closest comps for that composite player was a guy that just signed in free agency, Austin Hooper. So I just found that interesting. I think it does give you a pretty good indication of, all right, we're on the right track here, at least. If we're trying to figure out what Elliott Wolf likes at this position, and we've put all these numbers together and we've stirred them up in our little prototypical Patriots cauldron, and we've come out the other side with somebody who looks like Austin Hooper, who just got paid. And I'm not saying he's going to be a featured part of the Patriots offense or he's going to be a star player or anything along those lines. But to come out the other side of this process with an idea of a player who looks a little bit like Austin Hooper after Austin Hooper just got a little bit of money to come here and play for Elliott Wolf's football team, I think that tells us we're on the right track. Now, when it comes to what seem to be most critical traits at this position for this executive tree, it looks like size. So let's start at 250 pounds, because the majority of these players eclipse that 250-pound mark. And you will see when it comes to this year's draft class or any of these recent years' draft classes at the tight end position, if you set that as your low end threshold, you are immediately wiping out a bunch of names that don't get to that mark. So this is a relatively simple elimination process that we're going through right now. We'll start at 250 pounds. It also looks like quickness matters for these Wolf Tree executives, because of those 11 players, 9 of them clock short shuttle times under 4.5 seconds. Just some examples of players from this Wolf Tree who check those boxes. Just go back to last year where the Packers under Brian Gutekunst drafted 2 tight ends in the same class, Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft out of Oregon State and South Dakota State, respectively. Musgrave, 6'6", 253, 4.41 shuttle time. Tucker Kraft, 6'5", 254, 4.29 short shuttle time. Both those guys were day 2 picks for Gutekunst. You can go all the way back to John Dorsey's draft in 2013 with the Kansas City Chiefs. They landed a pretty good player in the 3rd round that year. Is Travis Kelce, 6'5", 255 pounds, 4.42 short shuttle time. Obviously somebody like Vernon Davis, who was one of the freakiest athletes we've ever seen at the position, but weighed 254 ahead of the 2006 draft when he was drafted in the top 5 by Scott McLuhan for the San Francisco 49ers. He checks these boxes. So I'm not saying there's going to be anyone in this year's class that is going to be the next Vernon Davis or the next Travis Kelce, but we did find a handful of players who check these 2 critical boxes for us when it comes to that 250-pound mark and that sub 4.5 second shuttle time. Just shows you that at your size, you can move, you can change direction. You have the ability to theoretically get out in the run game, maybe even get out into space and track down a safety and put your body on him and take him out of a play, or run the kinds of routes that the Patriots or any other team from this tree are going to need you to run in that short to intermediate area where you're going to be able to shake a linebacker because you have exhibited that you have that minimum requirement when it comes to the foot speed aspect of your physical skill set to be able to execute the jobs asked. So here are our prototypical Patriots at tight end for this year. Start with Theo Johnson from Penn State, 6'6", 259, had a 9.93 relative athletic score this year and a whopping 4.19 shuttle for somebody who's almost 260 pounds. Now, he is not going to be the grittiest of blockers in this year's class, but with that size and that kind of athleticism, he has to be on our list. Next on the list is Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, 6'4", 250. So he just barely checks that weight threshold box that we're looking for, but a very quick shuttle time of 4.23 seconds. Also had big time jumps, 40 inches in the vertical, 10.6 in the broad. That's the 97th and 94th percentiles, respectively. So this is an explosive athlete, somebody who you might not necessarily trust to live in line and block defensive ends one-on-one on a regular basis. But if you're part of that wide zone attack that we think Alex Van Pelt could be implementing in Foxborough this year, you could get him moving laterally and getting out into space and blocking defensive backs and being completely functional in that regard. Also a really talented pass catcher and somebody who does have the competitive spirit, I would say, to be able to be a real yards after the catch kind of threat. So, is he a day 2 pick? Is he an early day 3 pick? Ben Sinnott is somebody that I would keep an eye on for the Patriots this year. AJ Barner from Michigan, 6'6", 251 with a 4.41 shuttle time coming out of a pro style offense. That is somebody that I think you could trust to play a little bit more in line, especially if he gets even a little bit. His frame might suggest he could get even a little bit bigger and stronger. That might be exactly what the Patriots are looking for, that under center pro style type of offense that Barner would be used to being a part of coming from Michigan. Obviously, they're so focused on the run game there. We've gone over that when we've talked about JJ McCarthy on this podcast and others, but that's the kind of fit that I think could really work here in New England. And then I'll give you maybe the most intriguing name to me, and he might be a later round pick than somebody like Sinnott, but given his size and athleticism, he's a pretty rare specimen. And I wonder if Elliott Wolf, Matt Grove, Gerard Mayo, Alex Van Pelt would say the same thing of Tip Ryman from Illinois, 6'5", 271 pounds, but do not be thrown off by that weight. He is not an undersized offensive tackle. He had a 1.55 10-yard split. That's a 91st percentile for tight ends. Again, that's a position group now where you see a ton of guys who are coming in about 40 pounds lighter than Ryman, and he's still in the 91st percentile when it comes to his get off in the 40, a 4.26 shuttle and almost a 7-second flat 3-cone. Extremely impressive for someone of his size. He also, I think, has the kind of backstory that the Patriots would appreciate. He was a walk-on at Illinois, eventually became a captain. He'll block, he'll play special teams. I think his hands are dependable enough that he could be a big-bodied target in the pass game. And again, he is a pretty special athlete, given his frame, that could translate to some offensive success with the ball in his hand. So day 3, you're still looking for a tight end. You have Austin Hooper, you have Hunter Henry, but you're looking for somebody maybe a little bit more sturdy to play on the end of the line, to be able to handle those responsibilities when you're in the kind of game where it's late November into December and you're in a must-win sort of situation. Who knows how many of those the Patriots will be in 2024, given what we think the roster might look like, even by the time we get to September. But 4-minute offense, you're trying to kill clock. Do you necessarily want somebody like Hunter Henry out there? If the entire stadium knows you have to run the football, he can do it. Hunter Henry can. There's no question about it. But would you rather have somebody who's 6'5", 271 and can just lean on some people at the line of scrimmage and get movement that way and be a good athlete to boot? I like the idea of Tip Ryman on day 3. There's one more name here, Austin Stogner from Oklahoma, 6'6", 254, almost purely based off the testing numbers alone. He did play a lot of football at Oklahoma, caught 17 passes for 196 yards and a score last year. It doesn't scream draft pick, but at 6'6", 254 with a 4.39 shuttle time, he ends up on this list as well. So there are your prototypical Patriots. Let's roll right into now our prototypical corners, which, if it's not on NBCSportsBoston.com by the time you're listening to this podcast, it will be very quickly. Again, a little bit easier for us to compile this list because we know what we're looking for. This is what Bill Belichick was looking for. That's at least how we're going to handle it this year. If we're seeing drastic changes under Elliott Wolf, then we'll roll with those. But because the Patriots defense looks like it will continue to be the Patriots defense as we've known it under Gerard Mayo, DeMarcus Covington, Bill Belichickian pupils, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for change of direction. Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, Devin McCourty, Logan Ryan, go on down the list. Guys that show really, truly special change of direction ability. Speed helps, explosiveness helps. Of course, yes, and yes. But it's that ability to transition. If you can transition out of your back pedal and it doesn't take you any wasted steps to go from direction 1 to direction 2, that's what they're looking for. That's what they have looked for a long time. Of course, they want guys who fit into a man-to-man scheme as well. And of course, they want tough players. They want players who can tackle. That was true under Bill Belichick. That will be true under Gerard Mayo as well. So if you're in that 4.10 short shuttle range, if you're in that 7-second and, hopefully well below that 7-second 3-cone range, you've got a shot here in New England. Explosive, quick, good athletes, people who have a healthy appetite for contact. All of those are fits for the prototypical Patriots at corner this year. And on this year's list, we've got 9 players that were invited to the combine who seem to fit this mold. Now, a handful of them, the Patriots, in all likelihood, will not have the opportunity to draft. Terrion Arnold from Alabama, 6 feet, 189 pounds, ridiculous 3-cone, 6'9" in the 3-cone. Guy that you could use in a variety of different roles, really experienced under Nick Saban, and playing that man-to-man style would be an easy fit. Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, 6 feet, 195, had an excellent Senior Bowl. He actually could be the first corner off the board this year, just given his physical traits. 4'3", 40, 38-inch vertical. Again, great job competing against higher-end competition when he went down to Mobile, Alabama. Those guys are going to be first-round picks. The same could be said potentially for Cooper DeJean from Iowa, 6'1", 203. He's coming off an injury that ended his season last season, but he's actually set to, we are taping this on April 5th. He is set to work out for NFL teams on April 8th. So he's healthy enough to try to put on a show for teams in just a few days. And even though we don't have testing numbers for him, he makes this list because he's so versatile, because he is tough, because he's going to do a lot of those things that the Patriots have really valued in the past. But again, somebody, if the Patriots are investing in offense, which we think they will be in the first round, they're not going to have an opportunity to get that guy. Okay, so who are more likely options? How about Javon Bullard from Georgia, 5'10", 198. He actually played safety last year for Georgia, but he's on our corners list this year because 2 years ago in 2022, he was probably a little bit better player as sort of a slot corner. And so that's where I could see him fitting in at the next level, especially with a 3.97 short shuttle time. That is elite change of direction ability, but he also brings that mentality and experience under, Kirby Smart and that Georgia defense. Not all that dissimilar from what you might find in terms of technique and what's taught there at Alabama. And so we know the Patriots have loved that Georgia program in the past. It wouldn't surprise me if they invested there again this offseason. So Javon Bullard, how about his teammate, Kamari Lassiter, 6 feet, 186, more of an inside out corner versatility kind of prospect as opposed to a safety slot versatility kind of prospect the way Bullard is, but similar mentality in terms of willingness to tackle, willingness to play just about anywhere. And again, off the charts change of direction. 6'6", 3-cone time, and then not quite as impressive, but still impressive nonetheless, 4.12 shuttle time. He checks just about every box. He ran in the 4.5s at his pro day. And so I wonder where he'll end up being drafted. There may be teams who are scared off by that 40 time, but to me, he's fast enough. He is plenty gritty to be the kind of guy who the Patriots could look at and say, he could be our number 2 across from Christian Gonzalez, especially with that mentality, with that play style, and with that change of direction ability. That's typically what they're looking for. If they're looking for a nickel, how about a local guy? Mike Sanderstil, Michigan, 5'9", 182, out of Everett, Mass, former receiver at Michigan. So he has just 2 years on the defensive side under his belt, but 6 picks and 2 returned for touchdowns, and absolutely fearless as a run defender, even though he's 5'9", 182. So his frame might have some teams a little bit concerned. Okay, we're really going to play this guy close to the line of scrimmage. We're really going to ask him to be, part of our run force on a regular basis. I'd be okay with that because he is so twitchy. He is so tough. You can tell just by watching him, he is fearless. And for the Patriots on day 2, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for, the next Jonathan Jones, maybe you feel like Marcus Jones is slotted in, no pun intended, for that slot position down the line. Maybe he is, but I know the Patriots view Marcus Jones as sort of an inside out, versatile kind of chess piece back there. And we saw him actually play on the boundary in his rookie year. And he had some success against guys like Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins deep down the field. He is a special athlete. Marcus Jones is. And so, boy, are you a little undersized in the secondary if in 2025 or 2026, you've got Marcus Jones on the outside and Sanderstil on the inside playing your nickel spot? You might be, but boy, both those players are so much fun to watch. And I think you'd be tough enough, clearly, with both of them that you might be willing to go that route in this year's draft. A couple more names for you. Miles Harden from the University of South Dakota, not to be confused with South Dakota State and the Jackrabbits. 5'11", 195. Ryan Watts from Texas, 6'3", 208. He might be a safety at the next level, but next level movement skills for somebody with his frame. And he's practically got offensive line sized arms in terms of their length, 34.5-inch arms. He looks built to play as a press man corner on the outside. If you feel like you can get the most out of that skill set on the boundary. And if he turns into a safety, if he turns into a special teams guy, then sure, that's what he turns into. But boy, his traits are way too tantalizing, in my opinion, for you not to try him at corner, even if it didn't always go all that well for him out there at Texas. Handful of other names that were not invited to the combine that are going to be on this list, but I want you to go on over to NBCSportsBoston.com and check out the full list of our prototypes at corner. A lot of fun. Again, and we'll continue to hammer away at these defensive positions. We're going to get into our pass rushers. We're going to get into our off-the-ball linebackers, spots that I could see the Patriots investing in this year's draft. We know, or we think we know, that offense will be the focus there, but certainly plenty to get after when it comes to defensive prospects in this year's draft class. Okay, so there's your prototypical Patriots run through a tight end and corner. Now let's get to that conversation with Charles Davis, the great Charles Davis from NFL Media. This is one of our combine conversations that we've been able to run back for you, but he's got great insight on Jayden Daniels, on Drake Maye, and this Patriots staff and what they should do if they decide not to take one of those players at number 3 overall. Here's Charles. Very excited now to have with us on the Next Pats podcast, Charles Davis, NFL Network. You'll be here all week covering the combine. Charles, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to ask you first.
Yeah.
Patriots are sitting there with the number 3 overall pick. All kinds of options.
Say that again.
I'm
still trying to get used to that.
Overall, New England Patriots on the clock.
Haven't done that in a lot of years.
It's the highest pick that Robert Kraft has ever had in his 30 years of ownership. What do you do if you're sitting there? And who do you hope falls to you at 3? We're talking a lot about quarterbacks, but it's not their only option with that pick.
You're right. It's not their only option because to me, everything's available right now. This is a team in drastic need of overhaul, right? In drastic need of infusion of talent. The best players you can get. I don't care what number you're picking. Pick the best players because this is a time you're going to build around. I would not draft for need in this one if I were the Patriots. I'm drafting the best player available every single time. I know people talk about it and then it doesn't feel like it. To me, that's what it is. Now, quarterback's a huge need. Best player available at the top of the board is going to be a quarterback, all right? Is it going to be? Because I'm going to say Caleb Williams is gone, all right? I'm going to say he's going to Chicago. Let's not kid ourselves, all right? So the draft kind of starts at 2 with Washington. Does Washington go and take another North Carolina quarterback after Sam Howell? Because sometimes we get caught up in that, all right? Or do they go Jayden Daniels there, coming out of LSU? Either way, if I'm the Patriots, I would hope that they would like either Daniels or Maye. I think that Daniels has just had an exceptional year. I got to tell you something. When I watch Maye throw the football, I'm beyond impressed.
Really? What is it about how he lets it rip? Because it looks like he's got the big arm. Is there anything that concerns you in terms of the fundamentals or the mechanics? That I think is some of the criticism that you get with Drake Maye,
which is a normal criticism. Part of it is him trying to fashion plays and make plays that maybe weren't there. Him trying to force and do a little bit more to bring a team along that wasn't quite there. They had a great start last year, but it all caught up with them. Offensive line wasn't quite as good as they needed it to be, so he's still trying to make that extra play, and sometimes that runs you into trouble, especially when you're as uber talented as a young man is, as he is. So sometimes you make a throw you're not supposed to make. Matt Ryan got through college at Boston College with a lot of interceptions, but he had a group of receivers that none of them even went to a pro camp. So we have to balance some of the things we're looking at, and I do think a lot of it we can clean up with Drake Maye. And I think they're also saying, just kick and run the football.
You're an SEC guy.
Yeah.
Tennessee Volunteer. When you see somebody have the success that Jayden Daniels had in the SEC, would that move you? If you're the Patriots brass now led by Elliott Wolf in the front office and Gerard Mayo, another Tennessee guy.
Yes.
And you see the level of competition that he performed so well against, does that make you believe that you can project maybe a little bit easier with him versus somebody like Maye who's playing at a different level?
I think that we're at that stage. I don't worry about it with Maye because it's the ACC. You know, Trevor Lawrence came out of the ACC and Wasn't hard to project he was the best quarterback in the draft. I think with Daniels, he reminds me of in recent years the so-called late rise. Transfer quarterbacks going somewhere else, didn't work in the first place for whatever reason, going to the next place. Joe Burrow doesn't beat out Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State. Everybody screams about it. Dwayne Haskins threw 50 touchdown passes that year. So they made a pretty good choice, but it worked for Burrow at LSU, and by senior year, he was number 1 pick in the draft. Look at Zach Wilson. He wasn't a transfer, but he developed really late. Now, I know it hasn't worked in the pros, but he's the number 2 overall pick. Daniels, Arizona State. 2 years ago, you would have never projected him to be the number 2 or number 3 pick in this draft. It never would have come up, but the rise has been there. To your point, the SEC, you never turn it down. I'm going to give you this. You go anywhere else in the country and you ask a coach recruiting outside the SEC, and they have their best pass rusher. You know what they always say? He's an SEC pass rusher. If they say he's an SEC pass rusher, that's the legit item. That tells you about the competition and what you're dealing with week in and week out.
Little different world.
A different world. So it doesn't matter if you're out in the Pac-12, God rest its soul. You're in the Mountain West. If you have that pass rusher and that coach says, he's like an SEC pass rusher, that's the highest praise.
Last thing I want to ask you, how difficult would it be, understanding that this Patriots roster has its fair share of holes right now, and maybe those get addressed in free agency. Right. I'm sure some of them will.
Some will.
Would it take a lot for you to move off of the 3rd pick and say, we're not really ready for a quarterback right now? It's better for us to go to 6 with the Giants, go to 8 with the Falcons, somebody who's desperate for a quarterback, and we'll stockpile picks. Maybe we'll be back in the quarterback market next year, and we'll take our receiver or our tackle in the top 10, and we'll go from there. Do you like that plan, or is that getting a little too cute when you have some pretty talented quarterbacks at the top?
I don't think it's too cute if you as an organization have evaluated those quarterbacks and don't believe they are your true franchise quarterback. If you don't believe that they are, then I love where your plan's headed. Go stockpile and do that. But you better be transparent saying it to your fan base. You better tell them, we did not see these guys as that person, and then live with whatever happens. Because if you don't take them and they become stars, you're going to get roasted anyway. But you better tell them on the front end, we didn't see them as the face of our franchise, so we're going to stockpile, we're going to go and do it another way, we're going to get a veteran, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. But if you have conviction about one of these top 3 quarterbacks, and he's one of your guys, I don't get off that number 3 pick. I'm hitting the reset button, I'm starting with a quarterback, and then I start building around him.
I love your point about transparency with the fan base.
You better tell them.
It's a new regime in New England.
Absolutely.
Already.
And Gerard has already pledged that that's where he's going to be. And I know it's going to be hard to maintain that. I hope that he's able to. But for the bigger ones, Mr. Kraft, whoever sends the message, I think you have to. If you don't take a quarterback at 3, you'd better tell your fans exactly why you did not. But if you have conviction about one of those guys at the top of the board, take him and don't look back.
When it comes to transparency, at least with us in the media, for all the great things Bill Belichick did, sort of a low bar for these guys to clear. So they should be able to describe to us in those terms how they're feeling in real time.
And by the way, you don't need to be transparent when you're winning a lot of rings.
That helps. Charles Davis, NFL Network. Follow all his coverage from here in Indianapolis at the Combine. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Just be open. Just let the people know. Might not look all that great if Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels ends up going on to star wherever they end up being drafted. But I think he's right. I think people are going to be upset, and the owner might be upset, quite frankly, if the Patriots don't end up taking quarterback at 3. I believe they will. But if they don't, they've got to be upfront and tell the people why. Because fans, ownership, others in the organization, I'm sure the marketing department are licking their chops, I'm sure, about finding a quarterback at that number 3 overall position. And so if you don't take one there, you best be explaining yourselves as to why that was the decision. I thought it was a pretty good point by Charles there. There is going to be some massaging of the message that needs to happen if they decide to go that route. And maybe that's the right way to go, but you have to understand where your fan base is at, where their minds are at the moment. And I think there is some work to do in terms of building confidence there, and how you handle your post first round press conference, whether you're Elliott Wolf or Gerard Mayo or both, I think could go a long way in terms of helping build or not build said confidence. All right, that's it for for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. We appreciate y'all for listening. We appreciate Charles Davis. We appreciate John the Skull Crusher Henry, as we always do, for slapping these podcasts together with such alacrity. Thanks again for listening. We will have 2 more pods for you next week. The Next Pats podcast continues to churn along. We'll go through a couple more conversations next week that we'll be able to roll out there for you. We'll continue to hit on this quarterbacks conversation. J.J. McCarthy, is the interest there real? We'll have a little bit more on that next week in all likelihood. So make sure you're sticking with us right here on the Next Pats podcast. We'll talk to you next time.